Welcome to my how to remove K-series transmission video. This is going to be more so of a watch me do it instead of a how to do it. So diving in, the first thing I start out with usually, it all depends. In this situation, the first thing I'm starting out with is going to be my axle nuts. Just going to break those guys free because we're going to get around to that eventually, and then we'll move on from there. And then obviously this part may or may not apply to you. You still have to get off your intake or your cold air intake, whatever you may have, but I'm going to be removing my turbocharged piping here. Now that that's out of the way, we're going to go ahead and move on to the shifter stuff. I'll be working down here on the slave cylinder, and then I do have my cable to hydro actuator down here that I'll be, I guess, not necessarily messing with, but I will be pulling the cable itself off of that guy. Next, move on to the cables themselves. They do have the quick little disconnect coming into the shifter itself, and then I just leave them attached to the brackets, or I'll remove the whole bracket, but in this case I'm removing the transmission and going to swap that bracket over so they're coming off attached to that bracket all in one unit. And then I do have a ground going down here, and I do have a couple of wires and vacuum hoses kind of tucked underneath the cable, so I'm trying to make sure I get everything pulled up out of the way so that I can remove and reinstall the transmission safely. And then after that, here we're pulling out the speed sensor out of the rear, and I realized that I've chewed my speed sensor up, but we'll tuck that out the way and worry about that another time. So here I'm moving on to that passenger side CV axle. We talked about breaking the nut free at the very beginning. So now I'm actually going to get the axle out. I start off usually by just disconnecting that upper control arm all the way from the ball joint, from the knuckle assembly. Depending on how much room I do need, sometimes I'll disconnect the outer tie rod itself, and then the brake line just from the bracket. I leave all that still sealed, but just enough to get me extra slack. And I'll usually just pull the whole knuckle assembly forward while wiggling the axle out. Usually I just leave the lower ball joints attached. And so the passenger side is out, and rinse and repeat the process. Like I said, upper control arm, potentially the actual outer tie rod. I do have the torsion bars from my traction bar going, so I will also have to remove the torsion bars. Oh, and then I guess I didn't mention too, it's a given, I do remove the actual lower fork. I do not remove the whole strut itself. I leave the shock coil over in there. And then yeah, I just occasionally disconnect that outer tie rod. But I mostly, for the most part, just leave the lower ball joint attached, wiggle the whole knuckle forward, and wiggle the axle out. And I do keep my battery in the trunk underneath the cargo stuff in the spare tire area. I also have my sub on top of that and the amp and all that, so the sub has to come out in order for me to get to the panel that hides the battery, and then I can disconnect the battery, which there's the sub. I'm starting to realize is not the best for situations like this, so I will eventually end up putting a quick disconnect somewhere else for the battery, so at least I can just kill power to it and not have to go through this whole process. But here we are, at least disconnecting the battery, so that now I can start the process of disconnecting the starter itself. There I go, disconnecting the starter itself. And here I am disconnecting that front bolt that holds my torsion bar, traction bars to the, I guess, traction bar assembly at the front. What replaces the front subframe? I don't know what you call them, but yeah, the torsion bars, yeah. So I'm removing my one bolt that connects the torsion bars and completes the whole traction bar system. Now here working on the rear, I guess, T-bracket, just the rear trans mount. Make sure I get that little wishbone guy out of there. Just in the process of getting everything disconnected. Now there's the 2 or 3 bolts, whatever, that goes through the half shaft into the engine itself. Got to get underneath here and get those half shaft bolts out, and probably the bottom of that wishbone guy as well. Oh, and actually it might look like I'm draining the oil actually too, which I don't do too often, but yeah, drain the transmission fluid, definitely. Working on a couple of the upper bell housing bolts. I'll leave 1 or 2 at the bottom just so when it's in the air, kind of make things up and down or top to bottom. Just get one or two out of there and let her fall. So now I bring it basically all the way to the ground. Get my jack stuffed underneath there to support the transmission itself. I'll stuff a pry bar in here and we'll start disconnecting it from the engine. We'll let it fall onto the big jack itself and we'll slide her on out of there. And obviously can't forget the transmission mount itself from the driver's side. since the mount is out, the trans is coming loose, falling onto just the jack itself, using the jack to kind of wiggle it and free it up, make sure we're off the shaft, and then from there we slide her on out. Well, now that I got it out, first thing I discovered fuck, that motherfucker's wedged in there too. That's why I've never had issues. She goes. Had to get the right prior. Yeah. I was gonna keep the bearing. Swap over to my 6-speed. Guess I'll just buy another bearing. She sat outside. Really don't know nothing about it. The dude said it might grind, might not grind. Might grind a little bit. He just might not know how to drive. So, mystery tranny, Type-S, 6-speed. I'm gonna throw it in, see what happens. Old one's out, and no turning back now. I got a buyer on the way for the 5-speed. So, throw that one in. Hopefully it's enough to putt around while you rebuild that one. So, got 2 6-speeds here. Hopefully one's good. One's definitely gonna get the rebuild. They both might get the rebuild. We'll see what happens. 6-speed.